Hey everybody on YouTube, long time no see, welcome back. It's me, Rachel, the Student Witch. I hope you're doing well and that you're safe. Here in South America, shit is starting to hit the fan. At the moment, Brazil and Peru and Ecuador are not doing very well, especially Brazil. And here in Chile, we just had a jump in the number of cases that was, I think, more than 4,000 in one day being reported. And the hospital system is already on the verge of collapse. So it's just, this video isn't necessarily about the current pandemic, but the current pandemic, it affects practically every aspect of our everyday lives, and it's going to leak into what I'm talking about today, of course. It's a cold, rainy winter day here in Santiago. I feel like for those of us in the northern hemisphere, for those of us living in other places outside of the global north, we've been watching what's been happening to Italy and Spain and the UK and the US, and just kind of holding our breath until shit gets bad here, and it's starting to get bad here. So that's one of the reasons why I've kind of, I took a little bit more time off between this video and my last video, more time than I was planning anyway. Another reason is I was just really busy, and I'll kind of get into that in relation to my experiences with Brigid, because some of her wisdom and what she's shown me has affected my work schedule and affected just so many aspects of my life. That's another reason why I kind of delayed in making this video, because I couldn't really organize it in my head before sitting in front of the camera, because just so many things have happened since my last Spirit Model work update, which I'll link up here in the corner here. And after that, I'll also link the very first video I made about working with the Spirit Model. It's just been such a wild ride to begin to explore the Spirit Model of Magick and a relationship with Brigid at the same time that this pandemic has been happening. One thing that is going to be kind of a unifying thread throughout my experience with the Spirit Model and with Brigid is returning to the present moment, not losing myself to ruminations about the past or fears and anxieties I'm projecting onto a hypothetical future, but just really returning to the present moment. Returning to the present moment, it's not a universally good thing or bad thing. Returning to the present moment is just being present with what's happening, right? And sometimes that implies, coming into an awareness of and giving space to the facts. Things that are outside of your control that are affecting your life, and breathing your way through it. It might also require being present with shadows that you're struggling with things that need to be integrated, with behaviors or maybe negative self-talk that needs to, come to the light, be given light, so that way you can work through it, The present moment and the magic of the eternal present moment, it's not all, warm fuzzy feelings and rainbows and butterflies. It's also coming to terms with reality, coming to terms with sometimes the horrors of reality, right? And that's this pandemic in a nutshell, right? Just death, you know, literal death, the death of hundreds of thousands of people, the lives lost, but also metaphorical death. You know, as within, so without, as above, so below. So I notice a lot of personal themes in my life of like bearing witness to, you know, more personal level apocalypses in my life, right? The endings of things that allow for new beginnings. I also see on the larger scale, on the human, you know, humanity as a species in the 21st century kind of scale, I think we're all bearing witness to several apocalypses, the cracks and crevices of our institutions that we took for granted or that we weakened through neoliberal capitalism are starting to fall apart and give way to cold hard truths about inequity, you know, unnecessary human suffering, you know, the privileges is the privilege of the few at the expense of the many, things like that. So anyway, Brigid as a goddess of light, the fire and light of truth, you know, and that truth is accessed through multiple ways. I was thinking of her as, you know, she's the goddess of the fire, of the spark of inspiration and creativity. She's in that flame, in that spark. She's also in the flame, in the fire of the hearth of the home, which is the truth of, you know, I interpret anyway, the hearth being kind of a symbol of your well-being, especially the well-being of your body, your home, your safety, your place of your sanctuary, right? She's the flame of the eternal flame of the temple and the light of truth that comes from that kind of spiritual work and explorations. And she's also the flame of the forge, which is that heat, that hot, burning, transformative truth that once you see, you know. It's kind of a bifurcation truth that forces transformation, or at least allows transformation to happen once you bear witness to it, once you feel the heat and allow the melting and smelting process to take place, the destruction that is necessary in order for a new life, a new sense of well-being, a new purpose, you know, to be forged, right? And so I just think Brigid, she is in all of these flames, and I've kind of witnessed all of these flames on a very personal scale, but also on a larger scale in the weeks that followed my last update video. Brigid is in all of these flames, and something that I kind of struggle with belief in particular, and maybe this comes from my really analytic mind, which is a strength of mine, you know, depending on the situation. I have a very meta level of analysis when it comes to how my brain naturally works, right? And I think a lot of this comes from my training in academia. You know, hi Luna. Luna's joining me because I have the heater in here. I'm gonna pass out in front of the heater again. Don't get too close. It's amazing how close sometimes. Yeah, don't get too close. Like a moth to a flame, a cat will find a heater and get comfy. Anyway, what was I saying? I forgot. Oh yeah, so it comes really in handy, this kind of meta level of, you know, self-awareness, analysis, whatever. And I think anybody who's done their fair share of shadow work probably has experienced this, where you're not just feeling your feelings and enacting your actions and thinking your thoughts. You kind of step out of the immediate into a more, not really objective perspective, but a perspective that allows you to analyze yourself and analyze your own thought patterns and analyze your own emotions and analyze your own actions and think about where those emotions and actions and thoughts came from, why they're happening, that kind of thing, right? Sometimes when it comes to belief, especially belief in personified deity, keeping in mind I use belief as a tool, right? Speaking of meta levels of thinking and being and whatnot, that kind of analysis can sometimes get in the way. Like, for example, I try to get into a ritual mindset. I'm in front of my altar, which is right over there, lighting candles. And as I light a candle dedicated to Brigid, I say something simple like, in Brigid's name, I light this flame. And then I'm automatically thinking like, okay, this is what the candle represents, and this is how you're approaching Brigid, and this is how you make sense of Brigid. Like, I'm already analyzing my own enactment of belief. So something that I've been working on, I don't know if any of this makes any sense, something that I'm working on as I consciously work with the spirit model and work with belief in relation to personified deity, is I try to focus more on experience and to just permit myself to experience the experience and not think about how to make sense of the experience as the experience is happening. Because once I go down that road of analysis, analysis can sometimes lead to paralysis. It gets in the way of the experience, and it's like trying to hold water in your hand. The experience starts dripping out and you lose control of it. The more you try to tighten your fingers and make sense of it, you've already lost it, right? Because there's a wisdom to the present moment, and being immersed in experience, the experience of the divine, and not worrying about or thinking or analyzing or trying to define whatever that divine is and however it might be revealing itself to me at any given moment. It just requires returning to the present moment and being fully immersed in the present moment, right? And working with Brigid has really helped me to do that in big and smaller, more mundane ways. There have been so many synchronicities that have happened that I interpret as, or make sense of those synchronicities as, signs from Brigid. And I just, I record the synchronicity and I just, take it for what it is and decide what it is, right? It's a sign from Brigid. For example, the main synchronicity I wanted to talk about is back in April, I decided to treat myself to a new tarot deck because it's been several months since I bought a deck for myself. Well, that's a lie. I actually bought myself the Marseille earlier this year, maybe back in January or February, because I bought Hodorowski's book to go through the book and kind of teach myself the Marseille. A project I have set aside, not abandoned, just put to the back burner for now. just like my studies in astrology. Anyhow, so I decided to treat myself to a new deck, and I was looking for a deck that I thought could help me to connect with Brigid, because I had just read Tending Brigid's Flame. I cannot remember the name of the author off the top of my head. I'll have the name of the book and the author here. It was the very first and so far only written, published material I've read regarding Brigid. I just read that book, and I was looking on the market for a new tarot deck, and I saw the Shadowscapes Tarot. And the Shadowscapes Tarot is so beautiful. The artwork has Celtic influences, but also, you know, influences from fantasy, from just all sorts of different influences, but the Celtic influence is really strong there, which I liked. Just the colors and the artwork, and just how flowy and watery the energy of this deck is. It is that very flame, but also water energy to this deck. And so I bought myself the deck. I ordered myself what I thought was a real copy of this deck. But unfortunately, what I got was a cheap knockoff from China. The pictures online, I ordered this from, it's an app that I think just exists here in Chile called Mercado Libre, or the free market. How neoliberal. Anyway, it's basically like the Chilean version of Amazon. And so sellers can post items there, all sorts of just random stuff, from tarot decks and books to home appliances and computer parts and Lord knows what else, right? And so the person that posted this and, you know, was selling this deck, they didn't have a picture of the box because... Oh, hi baby. I think if I had seen an image of the box, I would have been able to tell it was a knockoff earlier. And so unfortunately, eventually I would like to get the real deal, because this knockoff deck has a few issues. Like, this is the Ten of Swords. I don't think in the real version of the deck, I think the borders are different colors, but in this deck, or in this knockoff copy, all the borders are this kind of silver gray color. The Ten of Swords, I don't know if you'll be able to tell, has some damage. There's like a crease here. I'm going to force it to focus on. Because the deck, or the box, was like down here in the corner, kind of smashed in, and so there is, I don't know if you can see, we have this old card table set up in the office because I'm trying to put together a puzzle, and Luna decided to jump up there and just hang out. What are you doing? Oh, did you find a new spot? She's never jumped up there before. Did you find a new spot? Do you like it? Yeah? Are you stuck? Don't walk on the computer. Hold on, I'm gonna have to help her down. Typical cat. What? What, baby? Yeah, come here. You wanna get down? Or you wanna go over here? Here, you wanna look out the window? Boop. Kitty TV time. Okay. So I was talking about how I got a knockoff of the Shadowscapes Tarot. However, you never know how Goddess is going to communicate to you, right? Right, Luna? Yeah. She's on the desk here next to me. You're looking for attention, aren't you? It's really interesting. As I was going through the deck, I noticed that there was a card missing. And it just so happened to be the Justice card. And I know, especially in her as a saint, as Saint Brigid, I know a lot of her stories and the miracles attributed to her had to do with justice, and she's associated with, you know, fighting poverty and social justice issues. And so I took that as just a direct zoom, a direct beam of communication from her saying, I'm here. And I took the Justice card from this tarot deck as payment. So it's been a wild ride to overcome that need to analyze, you know. Maybe that comes from a sense of control. I don't really know, or it's just habit because I'm so used to analyzing things as I'm doing my research. But those little moments, those little synchronicities, those things that make you feel like something is crossing your path, trying to tell you something, right? And it makes you think, and it makes you wonder. Those have been so magical, and it's been such a wonderful way to remember to get back into the magic of the present moment, because the magic happens in the present moment. Sometimes the magic happens in, you know, time traveling from the present back to the past, time traveling in the sense of reflection and ritual, using ritual to heal old wounds, you know. Magic can also happen in time traveling from the present to the future in terms of like setting an intention and manifesting something that you want in the future, right? There's an interesting kind of time traveling aspect to working with magic, right? But everything, I think, at least in my opinion and according to my experiences with this, everything needs to start or come from a place of being centered and fully immersed and surrendered to the present moment. And that even involves sometimes surrendering that need to feel like you're in control, or surrendering your fears, right? Like I was saying at the beginning of this video, being present to what is happening. It's not all just, you know, this wonderful feeling of inner peace and compassion. It can also be witnessing, you know, big scary things happening and acknowledging them and not trying to escape, right? Not trying to use like different coping mechanisms in a harmful way, you know, denial or escaping into fantasies or escaping into conspiracy theories or delusions. You know, we all have different ways of coping with this big huge thing that we're being forced to witness and live through, right? Whether you yourself have gotten sick, or you know someone who has, or you've lost people in your life to this pandemic, even if it hasn't touched you personally, your life has been changed, right? Radically changed in a matter of weeks. The future has been radically, or our plans and ideas of what we wanted in the immediate future has been radically changed, at least, you know, for a lot of us. And we've been asked to bear witness to this big scary thing, and that, you know, to be able to like be fully prepared to face it and to work through it, right? To find the solutions that we need to survive it to make the necessary changes in our global economy and in our societies and in our individual countries and even individual life circumstances, right? We need to be able to face it, to witness it, right? It's the light of truth, right? And that's where Brigid comes back in, shining that light onto the situation so that you may see it. And what you do after you see it is up to you and speaks to your character, right? Speaks to your strength. And, the Justice card being missing in this knockoff Shadowscapes Tarot deck, it was a moment of Brigid letting her light shine through so that way I could see it and I can, acknowledge that it's there. Right? It's been such a wild ride. In the past few weeks, at the end of May, or at the end of April and into May, I actually did a 19-day long kind of dedication practice to Brigid, just to give myself time in my schedule to open myself up to experience in the present moment during these kind of ritual dedications I was doing with her, and just see what comes through, and just to let her know that, hey, my door is open. And, depending on the day, I made a dedication to her in a different way. Sometimes I wrote a prayer to her. Other times I did a yoga practice dedicated to her. Other times I actually made hanging out via Zoom and socializing with our friends who are far, far away. That was a dedication to her. And it's just been such a transformative experience. The current pandemic, I know I keep going back to it, but it really, I can't separate my initial experiences with Brigid from the context within which those experiences took place, right? And I have been asked to shed light on and face so many of my fears. I feel like for the past 2.5, 3 years or so, really since my Saturn return, from that point onwards, I'm 32 years old right now, I've had to face so much. I've had to build my strength and endurance in so many big, scary ways. And Brigid has shed her light of truth, within me so that I could see it, and so that I can finally say, looking back on all these experiences of the past, 5 years or so, God damn, you're strong. And, for the first time, I can say that confidently, and for the first time I say that about myself, and I actually believe it. This has been such a growing experience for me. This has been such a transformative experience for me. This global catastrophe, global pandemic, we have been asked to, like I was saying at the beginning of the video, to witness truths coming out, with a vengeance. Fierce, scary, big truths. And that included, for me personally, that included truths within myself about changes I needed to make. And that includes changes to my personality, changes to my thought patterns, changes that I've known and I've intuited that I've needed to make for a while now. And now it's time for me to follow through with those changes. And I think Brigid, she came to me at this particular moment to accompany me, to guide me through these major changes that I'm making. And they're changes that are ultimately going to benefit me. They're going to help me manage and somewhat overcome my anxiety issues, my social anxiety, my, you know, tendency to panic attacks. She's going to help me to believe in myself. One of the earliest messages I got from her, and that's something that's been really interesting too, is I feel like I've received so many downloads from her. You know, now that I've done my 19-day dedication to her, and I received plenty of downloads from her during that process too. But now you know, during my usual morning routine, after having breakfast, before I get ready to start my day, I come to my altar, I light the candles, I light some incense, and I just kind of open myself up. Okay, what do you have to say to me today? And it's just, the words just come. The words just come. And it feels like it's coming from her. And so I just write down the words, and then I pull my tarot card for the day, and then I write down or start my gratitude list for the day. Just very simple, 5-minute morning. I don't even want to call it a ritual, it's more like a routine. But even during these simple routine morning rituals, right, her downloads have been so potent and direct. It's just incredible to attribute these kind of downloads to her, and kind of, I feel like the magic of the spirit model, right? The spirit model of magic and belief in disembodied intelligences or deity or whatever. The magic of that is you're putting, at least in my experiences with Brigid, you're putting a human face and a human voice to the divine, and that can make it a little bit easier to relate to. It can make it a little bit more direct and something that feels like you can touch and experience more directly than, or at least that's kind of how it's been feeling for me. And so one of the early downloads I got from her during these kind of very simple morning rituals was, everyone else can see your light, why can't you see it? Reclaim it, own it, witness it, acknowledge it, you know? Because I was having just so many self-esteem and confidence issues. That's something that's been something I've struggled with in relation to my social anxiety for decades, for years. And I finally feel like I'm at a turning point with it. I mean, it's, in many ways I know it's going to be a lifelong journey, but I feel like the wheel of change is turning. And I'm enacting that change through making changes to my routines, by purposefully doing things that are outside of my comfort zone, but that are still feel like they're safe enough for me to do. By opening myself up to connect more with people, because a lot of my social anxiety was a fear of connecting or a fear of being vulnerable with people. And so it just feels so mundane, but also so powerful and just world-changing. This idea of acknowledging my own inner flame, what I call my witch flame. And actually, another kind of synchronicity is I have this tattoo here, which I got years ago, back in 2015, the summer, like June-ish, June, July of 2015, and it's a flame with a triquetra. And I got this tattoo with that symbol, not really knowing why. My chair is squeaking, sorry. Not really fully knowing why I was so drawn to that symbol. Besides just kind of a vague idea, because I have a lot of ancestry that goes back to Ireland and goes back to hi baby, different parts of, you know, the UK and Scotland and England and all that. And just kind of a vague idea of like, okay, it's, you know, the magical power of the number 3 and life, death, and rebirth, and what, you know, maiden mother crone, if you work with those kinds of triple, or the magical power of the number 3, right? And it's only now, later, years later, that I fully realized just how significant this tattoo is. And actually, I also view that as a powerful message from Brigid, because that's another kind of download I've gotten from her once I realized, like, oh shit, like I got this tattoo for her before I even knew her or was aware of her. Because a message I've gotten from her is that she's always been with me. She was just waiting for me to be ready. She was ready, or waiting for me to be at the perfect moment for her to make herself known. And that's really interesting, and I'll link a very old, probably like 2 or 3 year old video here where I actually talk about this tattoo, because this is another tattoo I got years and years and years ago, and I didn't really understand its full significance to me, and how this is related to my matron goddess, the creatrix. That, you know, that's something I wasn't aware of until years and years and years later. And so that's the interesting time traveling aspect that I'm talking about, how you can look back to the past and see like synchronicities and messages that way, you know. It's just so fascinating. This Spirit Model of Magick has just been such a wild ride, particularly in this current context, pandemic kind of context. It's been a source of hope and empowerment. I've made several necessary changes in my life, in my routine and how I think, that have been needed for a while, and now I finally feel like I'm ready for them because of Brigid's guidance, because of her voice, because of her messages, because of her flame, right? It's just, I'm just so grateful. I just have an immense gratitude to this deity, and I'm just beginning to work with her and get to know her and open myself to her. So, man, I'm going to continue this journey. I'm going to continue to open myself up to her and see where this goes. I'm going to really plan, I'm making plans about reading more books about her, and, you know, trying to get my hands on copies of her mythology if I can, copies of her stories as a saint. But for the time being, when it comes to reading books about her by pagan authors or more kind of hands-on experience, you know, books about, you know, working with her, kind of like tending Brigid's flame, I'm going to put those aside for now, because I just want the pure, raw, unadulterated experience with her, directly with her, without, you know, reading about how other people relate to her. I just want it to be me and her, because it's just been such a powerful experience so far, and I want to keep building that foundation before I add other people's voices to it, if that makes sense. Yeah, I do plan on celebrating Imbolc this year, which for the Southern Hemisphere is, I believe, August 1st or 2nd, that time frame. And after Imbolc, then I'll try to get my hands on maybe a Kindle, like an ebook copy of some other, you know, witchy, pagany books written by authors who have worked with her. But I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful. It feels right. Above everything else, it feels right. So yeah, those are my experiences with Brigid so far. I guess the next video you'll see from me, I think I'm feeling I need to pick up back on my fertility awareness method content, because Fertility February this year just didn't happen, and so instead of, you know, all the content in February being about fertility awareness, I'm going to sprinkle it throughout the year. And so it's been a few months since I've had a fertility awareness related video, and so I'm excited to talk about healing my relationship to pleasure and kind of liberating myself from some leftover kind of Catholic guilt and coming out officially as bi, even to my family, which was scary and took me forever. Happened last August. So I want to tell that story and talk about my kind of liberating myself more from just outdated, outmoded, no longer useful, probably never was useful that much to begin with, kind of Catholic guilt and insecurities about my body, and healing my relationship to pleasure. So I want to talk about that in the next video, hopefully next week before the end of May. And then we'll see what happens in June. I'm sorry my content has been kind of sporadic lately, but just I'm trying to write a dissertation and apply to emergency funding because my research has been affected by this. And, you know, yeah, just a lot of work. I'm busy. I'll try to be as regular as I can, I promise. So, until next time, many blessings, and I hope that you stay safe and that your loved ones are safe and healthy, and yeah, much love. Bye.